Oh, so you think your party's tough, huh?
Well, can you solve these various scenarios that I'm going to throw at you today? Let's test how good your party actually is. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher aka Thraben U here for another Pathfinder Second Edition video, and welcome to Can Your Party Solve This Problem? Before we get going here, I just wanted to thank you all for the continued support. I am well on my way to my 4,000 subscriber stretch goal by the end of June. I've got this video and one more video to do it. And this is my big analytics push, and then at the end of month / beginning of July, I'm going to be reevaluating how much effort I put into this channel and seeing kind of how much sense it makes for me to continue working on Pathfinder content. Financially speaking, since my primary job is making Magic the Gathering content. I'd like to shout out Eric P. for funding this video idea. Eric sent me an idea about, hey, how do I make a character that does everything? And we did a little back and forth, and we thought it would be more interesting to flip it and say, hey, can your party actually address these specific problems that I've come up with? And shoutouts to my new YouTube members since the last video, the NellDK and Friday, who get early access to all of my videos moving forward. So my goal for today is to present both in and out of combat problems, and then try to figure out how your party would solve those problems. I'm going to give you some sample solutions to how you might address these, as some of these might be more difficult than others, and I'll kind of give you some explanations of some of the mechanics behind these that might make dealing with the specific problems easier. And one of my goals here in this video is to show you that optimizing characters isn't just about making the damage numbers go up. And so often when I see new posts from players on Reddit, or when I look at optimization guides, it is all about, okay, which weapon do I use so that I do the most damage? Which feats do I take so I do the most damage? With Maguses always being recommended, imaginary weapon, psychic dedication being a great example of that. When in reality, I think this video is going to show that making the damage go up isn't necessarily always going to be the most important thing to being a successful party. And while doing this, I'm going to try to make this as much as possible so that this video can apply to parties of every level. So I'm going to try to leave out specifics as much as possible, so I'm not going to set specific DCs for any of these challenges or anything like that. And I encourage you to actually play along with this. So I encourage you, grab a scrap piece of paper or grab a notes app on your phone, and I want you to just write out what classes your parties are. And if your party member's class might be different spell traditions, I want you to just kind of write down what spell tradition they have. That might help you in thinking about whether or not you can answer some of these specific problems, because different spells obviously are on different spell lists. And as a quick note here, if you have a larger party or a higher level party, you might have an easier time addressing some of these scenarios. You will simply have a better spread of skills or better access to utility spells as your parties get larger and as you level up more. And, Pathfinder Second Edition is all about those 4 degrees of success, right? So let's do the same in terms of our point scores here. So for each one of these things, let's rate this on a scale of 2 points to -1 points. A critical success means that you can very easily solve this problem. It doesn't matter what spells you have prepared, just on that given day, you're good to go, you can address this problem. A regular success is you can solve this problem, but it might be inefficient in some way. It might take a couple of turns of setup, it might be a little contrived, there might be a little bit of, all right, GM, I've got this idea, hear me out. Can I use this spell to sort of thing? I'm going to say that a failure is that you can solve the problem, but it takes you a significant amount of time. You might need to come back after you have re-prepared your spells. You might need to return to town to buy a scroll, or some other thing that takes a great degree of time. And a critical failure is, oh no, bruh, I don't know how I can solve that problem. We need to get Big Billy in town to come and help us out. So, if you've got your scratch piece of paper or your notes app, feel free to play along and rate yourself. And if you want, you can throw your point total in the comments down below. Although honestly, I am more interested in hearing about which specific problems that I came up with today that you were like, oh man, I didn't think of that one. I don't know how I deal with that one. So before we get started with the specific scenarios that I have made for today that are going to be more challenging, we're going to start with the lightning round. We are going to start with things that I think are pretty straightforward in terms of things a party should be able to do. And so for a lot of these, you're just going to go, oh, critical success. My party is prepared to do this. But I don't think each one of the bullet points that's going to be on the screen here is worth its own section. So here we go. First off, your party should be able to deal with opposing reactions. Your spellcasters should probably have something that shuts off reaction spells. These are going to be your roaring applause, hideous laughter sort of spells. And to put this in very, very easy to understand player terms, when people talk about fighters, they talk about reactive strikes. When people talk about champions, they talk about the champion's reaction. Now imagine you go through a whole combat and you are told you don't get to do the thing that your class is best at doing anymore. That's how powerful shutting off reactions is. So if you know that someone in your party regularly prepares this spell, or perhaps has a scroll of this spell waiting in their inventory, give yourself that critical success. Otherwise, score yourself appropriately. Next up is dealing with flying enemies. There are two very, very different ways to play a dragon. Way number one is that dragon is dumb, and that dragon flies down to you and uses its breath weapon and then never uses its flying speed again. And way number two, that is much scarier, is that dragon goes and plays as a skirmish enemy that maybe will use Draconic Frenzy, make a whole bunch of strikes, and then fly 40, 100 feet up in the air and be an absolute menace. And then it may kind of go in and out of combat range of your marshals, which can be terrifying. So, do you have a way to deal with flying enemies? And that could explicitly be the spell Earthbind, or that could just be your marshals being prepared to take other actions versus a flying enemy. Does your marshal have a ranged weapon that they can pull out and at least meaningfully contribute to combat when a flying enemy is around? Do they have a potion of flying in their inventory for an emergency scenario? Things like that. It could also be that your spellcaster might not have Earthbind, but they do have Fly, so you throw Fly on your fighter or your barbarian, and now they get to meaningfully contribute to combat, while you can just do your spellcasting stuff. Next up is invisible enemies. They can be a major pain in the butt. For those of you that have played the Dawnsbury Days expansion, if that was your first experience with invisible enemies, boy, it was probably not fun. Now, on your second playthrough, when you know that's coming, and you have prepared your Fairy Fire, your Revealing Light, whatever, and now all of a sudden those enemies aren't nearly as threatening, it's an entirely different story, right? Next up, you should have some way to deal with level +3 bosses. Or if you're lower level, level +2 bosses. You should have something that helps swing the math in your favor. Maybe this is Bless, maybe this is Keen Axes / Kelgasurk's Axes, maybe this is Heroism, maybe it is Mutagens. You need some way to turn it up when you get into a serious boss encounter. And this is one of those things that I think most experienced players will just definitely critically succeed in. You know this sort of stuff is going to be coming. And sometimes you even will know specifically what session it is going to be in, as, you know, you walk into a big ritual room and then, like, the GM's like, and that's where we'll end our session. Like, you know the fight's coming, right? Next up, can you deal with unusual enemies? And by that, I mean things that constrain your normal actions in some way. This might be an enemy that has extremely high hardness or resistances. Maybe it is a construct that is just very, very difficult to damage. Maybe it is an ooze that splits when it is dealt certain types of damage. If you have some tools in your arsenal to prepare for these situations, it makes it much more reasonable. Another Donsbury Days example, but for those of you playing through that, I'm going to try to be spoiler free here. You know that one construct in that room to the north? If you faced that on insane difficulty, you know that it is an absolute nightmare, and it might involve 5+ turns of you sitting there trying to hit it if you are not prepared for that specific enemy. Similarly, you might run into some oozes, and if you didn't actually read the stat block before you clicked attack, or in real play, if you didn't recall knowledge on that ooze, you might not realize that they split and that you just doubled that enemy's action economy, even if you halved its HP. Probably related to the level +3 bosses one, you should have some way to waste enemy actions. Grapplers, trippers, this is one of the places where you shine. Or if you have something that can deny enemy actions, maybe literally with something like slow, or maybe effectively by making them do flat checks, that is a great way to waste enemy actions and make them scarier. If you have strike plus actions that maybe do something like strike and then step out of range of the enemy so that they have to waste an action coming to you, that is another good way to just kind of improve your game. And finally, and low-level players, I want you to ignore this one because this starts becoming relevant probably north of about level 12, is you need to be able to answer death effects. There are just spells that say if this reduces you to 0 HP, you just flat out die. No dying one, no wounded nonsense, you just die. So having some things that can stop these death effects, perhaps by making it so that a player remains at 1 hit point instead of 0 hit point, or having something that can bring them back from the dead, such as the 7th level spell Shock to the System, those can be very, very important at high level play. I can tell you in the last encounter that I played in my current 14th level campaign, I answered 2 death effects in 1 battle, and it was a really big deal. One of our party members still died anyway, but that's not important here. So you can total up the number of points from the lightning round there, kind of see how you think you did. And again, lower level parties, ignore that death effect one. That one is just not going to be something that you can solve until you get to later levels. In all likelihood, there's a few specific things, such as Orcish Ferocity, that could keep you up at 1 hit point, but most classes, generally speaking, are going to have access to things that answer death effects for quite some time. So, with that being said, let's go into the actual scenarios that I have drawn up for today, many of which are experiences from my actual play as well. So, scenario number 1 is what I'm going to call the broken bridge. You have some sort of bandit who has stolen a treasure of some kind, or maybe stole some of the party's items or information or whatever, and you are trying to chase them down. And they cut the ropes of a bridge, leaving the bridge in an unusable state. And you have a 50-foot gap that you need to cross to continue to chase after this bandit. And I want you to imagine this as like, the video game cutscene where it zooms in on the bandit as he just like shing, shing, cuts the bridge, and you just watch it droop down to unusable status. So you are actively chasing this bandit. So we're going to have 2 different questions here. Question number 1 is, can you cross this gap and catch the bandit before they escape? And this does kind of hint at a possible answer here, can you get your entire party across, or can maybe only certain party members get across? So look at your PCs, look at your options, think about what your fellow players can do, and think about what is my answer to the broken bridge scenario. Pause the video here if you need to, because I'm about to go into some potential answers. All right, here we go. So let's say you are a kineticist, an earth kineticist specifically. You have a stepping stones ability that you can use to just kind of make giant slabs of stone, and you could use that to fully cross at later levels. If you are level 1 specifically, you can get most of the way across with your stepping stones, and then leap across from there. Or very specifically, it would be a long jump. And if you reduce that gap from, 50 feet to 20 feet or something like that with something like stepping stones, it becomes much more reasonable to try to throw a rope across or something like that, which for a 50-foot gap is perhaps not the most reasonable. Also, if you are thinking grappling hooks for this scenario, I'm just throwing it out there that grappling hooks are technically a secret check, so you don't really know how well you did on attaching that grappling hook before you put your weight on it. Just throwing that out there before somebody's PC dies. Next up, did you know that you can just use wall spells as bridges? Yeah, as it turns out, most of those wall spells are written so they don't have to be on the ground specifically. So you can just make a wall of stone into a bridge. And I believe there are even some focus spells on the Oracle. I think it's called like Rainbow Bridge or something like that, Cosmic Bridge, that just straight up makes a bridge with this exact function. Perhaps from an ancestry feat, you have the ability to fly. Maybe you have the fly spell. That would be a very simple way to cross. But with flying, that is maybe a scenario where how many of your players can you actually get across? How many spell slots do you have for fly? How many scrolls or potions of flying do you have? Now, could you heroically attempt to long jump a distance of 50 feet? Theoretically, the answer to that question is yes, but you can't long jump more than your speed. And the first level spell, Jump, I believe, caps out at 30 feet for your jump distance. So, if you want to long jump and make a gap of 50 feet, you need something to increase your speed, and maybe increase it quite a bit. If you get to the point where you have a speed of 50 feet, you could critically succeed at a long jump and make it over this gap. However, you need to be really confident that you are going to critically succeed at that roll, as the downside of failing on that roll would be you plunging down some sort of cliff. In my days of D&D, there was a meme that the thing that killed the most characters was actually just falling damage. Now, let's imagine instead you can't necessarily get across, or maybe all of you can't get across. What if you have Flying Familiar? Well, you can send that familiar ahead, and maybe that familiar keeps an eye on the bandit and then circles back to you, and maybe you can still succeed on this task overall, even if you can't do it immediately. And maybe this gives you time to do unorthodox situations. So, for example, if you're like, I'm going to barbarian answer this problem. I'm going to cut down a tree, and I'm going to throw a tree across the gap. Yeah, as a GM, I would absolutely allow you to attempt that, but that would be one of the things where I would probably say, like, hey, you can absolutely do this. It's going to take a while. There's going to be a few rolls associated with it, and you're going to fully lose track of the bandit. Well, if you can send one person ahead that flies, or a familiar ahead, or a summoned minion ahead, or something like that, maybe you have a chance of still succeeding at this task overall, even if you can't do it immediately. So here was the first of the tricky scenarios that I had for you. So rate yourself on that scale of critical success to critical failure. Okay, the next one here is the first time that we nearly had a player character death in my first Pathfinder 2E campaign. So this is a real one. This happened. And the result was a 6-day struggle to stay alive. Are you ready to deal with diseases, poisons, afflictions, curses, and things of that nature? So here's the scenario. A difficult boss, some player level +2, player level +3 boss, depending on your exact level, has left you with some sort of terrible disease. And the DC is tough to pass. And you are, in fact, probably expected to roll a failure on the roll. And the cost of failing over the course of multiple checks is just a potential PC death. Or, at the very least, multiple days of lost adventuring time. Again, when this happened to my party for the first time, it was 6 days of adventuring time lost as we, did one roll on this disease every single day. So my question for you is your party ready for this? Can you remove the condition? Because my party absolutely was not ready for this, and it nearly resulted in the death of two of our PCs. Two of our PCs, myself included, were one roll away from death at multiple times over the course of these days. So here's your moment. Pause if you need a little time to think. And here's our solutions. So, Cleanse Affliction is the easy one here. Now, notably, due to how counteract checks work, things like Dispel Magic and Cleanse Affliction, generally speaking, are only going to be useful in their top level slot. And spellcasters, this is a time for you to do some thinking here. If your top level slots are normally just the firebolts, the lightning bolts, the synesthesias, the slows of the world, you might not actually be ready for scenarios like this that pop up. And it may be that you can address this problem, but you can't address this problem today. And I'm not saying, hey, you should have Cleanse Affliction prepared every single day, but if you know that you are going into some awful disease-ridden area, or if your GM has telegraphed that the upcoming boss enemy is going to be giving you diseases, this might be a good use of your time. Or alternatively, this could be a good time for you to buy some scrolls. And this obviously depends on your exact financial state. And sometimes towns won't have higher level items that you need. And if you had to go to the big city to get your Cleanse Affliction scrolls before going in and fighting the boss, that would be a lot of adventuring time wasted if that was going to be your only way to solve this problem. Now, you can just use Treat Disease as a way to do this, an action that you can take if I believe you're trained in medicine or better. But really, the only way that you're going to be successful at that role is maybe if you have maxed out medicine, you have some sort of item bonus on top of that, and maybe you have some other bonus stacking on top of that too. And if you have any sort of way of boosting your saving throws, re-rolling, or anything like that, it can be very, very much appreciated on a critical save like this. As a side note here, one of the best ways to stop diseases from being scary in the first place is to just do things that are going to prevent you from getting them. Or at least decreasing their danger if you do get them. So the fast recovery feat does something like if you succeed on a roll against a disease, you decrease it by 2 instead of by 1, which can eliminate that disease much faster and prevent some of the boomeranging back and forth between various disease levels. Or you could take something like breath control, where if you know there's an inhaled poison coming up, or that's the sort of thing that your GM likes to use a lot, when you succeed on a save versus something that would be inhaled, it becomes a critical success instead, and you just kind of totally run around this problem instead of it being a very, very serious issue. So if you read things like Reddit posts about diseases, you have people going in two very, very different directions with them, where it's either, hey, diseases don't seem that scary, or, yeah, my PC died to mummy rot and there was nothing we can do about it. So give yourself some points based on how you think your party would do. All right, for the next one, we're going to kind of go to a movie scenario here. So you're going to be delivering a package, but you're going to pass through some sort of cave, and it's got a long, narrow tunnel of some kind, some sort of choke point. And then the enemy goes and reveals themselves. They're up above you. They have a ton of archers. And they're like, give us the thingy. We need the thingy or we're going to kill you all. We've got you surrounded. Well, what are you going to do in this ambush scenario? We're going to say that this is an ambush, so you are outnumbered. So you are in a bad position tactically. You've got a bunch of archers or gunslingers or spellcasters above you. We'll say they're about 50 feet up. And we're going to say that this would be a difficult fight if you were on even ground. So unless every single one of your PCs can meaningfully contribute to the combat, fighting is not an option here. So, given these circumstances, can you safely get through the choke point? Let's say it's like 100 feet long. Do you think that you can get through there before you get gunned down? How are you going to solve this problem? Pause the video if you need a minute to think. And here's some of my answers. Just because you are presented with a scenario where you are in initiative does not necessarily mean that you have to think of yourself as actively in combat. And it might be better to try to win this scenario without trying to kill all of the enemies. If you have looked into the rules of things like climbing, unless you have a climb speed, it's probably not super viable to try to climb like 5 or 10 feet at a time up a 50-foot wall while enemies are peppering you with spells and attacks. So, this instead might be a time that you would prefer to use tactics and hide. There are a bunch of spells that do something like make a giant cloud that makes everyone concealed on one side or the other of the cloud. So if you're inside the cloud, you can see the stuff inside the cloud, but if you're outside the cloud, you can't see the stuff in the cloud, and vice versa. So you might throw up some spell that shuts off the line of sight of all of these various archers and spellcasters, and then try to make a good run for it. And if those enemies are missing half of the time on their rolls, yeah, you can probably just run through there. Maybe you have a way to turn all of your party members invisible, and that would be another way to accomplish the same sort of thing, or some sort of darkness spell. Or maybe you can just creatively use some spell for a purpose other than what it is normally used for. So let's use Wall of Stone as another example, because boy do I love that spell. I really want my next character to be able to cast it. So let's say that you use Wall of Stone, and you just go up and over with it, and you just make yourself a nice little ceiling to seal off this narrow passage, and you give yourself cover from those archers, and those archers just going ping, 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 without necessarily adding their strength modifier to their rolls or dealing a lot of burst damage, might not be able to break through that wall, and even if they do, did they break through the right squares to actually shoot you? Well, that's a whole nother story. Or maybe you can just use some spell creatively. For example, the spell Dragon Form just gives you a fly speed of 100 feet. So if your druid is like, I cast Dragon Form, I'm going to try to grab everyone and just fly us out of here, I wouldn't even make them roll for it. I would just say, yeah, no, absolutely. And I would just kind of maybe turn it into a chase at that point, giving the PCs a massive advantage in doing so because of the spell Dragon Form. Now, you can just try to fight your way out of scenarios where the opponents are at a tactical advantage. But things like difficult terrain, having to climb cliffs, and stuff of that nature turn the math more than you would expect. Now, let's say, for example, 3 of your 4 party members are capable of fighting at a range very efficiently, and the last person has a good climb speed. You could just try to fight your way out of this scenario, but it might not be the most optimal solution to doing so. So give your party a little grade here, and we'll move on to the next one. Okay, for this next one, we're going to do a little bit of setup here. I would like you to randomly select one of your party members. It doesn't matter which one, just at this time, please randomly select one of your party members. Again, doesn't matter which one, doesn't matter how you choose, you can just point to one. All right, selected them. Here we go. Here is the scenario. This is a separated party fight. So the party member that you randomly just selected is the key person to winning an encounter. And the enemy knows that. And so they came in with a plan. An enemy spellcaster traps your key PC in a Wall of Stone prison. Or if you're lower level, pick some other appropriate thing that is the same effect. They cut them off with a wall of thorns instead. In some way, they separate them from the party with a wall spell. And for those of you not super familiar with walls, they kind of kick ass. They are immune to precision damage. They are immune to critical hits. And they normally have a very high hardness value. So looking down at this, I believe this is Wall of Stone that I snipped. That is hardness 14. So it's going to ignore the first 14 damage that you do to it with each action. And it's got 50 hit points. So this is chunky. So my question to you is, can you get your party member out in a timely fashion? And the emphasis here is on timely because they are the key person to winning the scenario in some capacity or another. Maybe they are the burst damage you need to kill people. Maybe they're the only person who can deactivate a haunt or make a certain skill check or something like that, but you need to get them out. Can you do it? And if so, how efficiently can you do it? Pause here if you need to. And here we go. Now, for some parties, the answer this time is actually just make the numbers go up. So let's consider that you are a giant instinct barbarian who is maxed out on strength, who has a ton of rage damage, and maybe even who has a raising weapon that is particularly good at destroying things like walls. They might be able to just walk up to it, guaranteed hit it, and take it down in a hit or two. That might be something that they are capable of doing. But I want you to consider instead if your marshal is a rogue or investigator that is going to normally do a ton of damage, but it's precision damage that gets ignored here. Or the fighters who normally do a ton of damage by getting critical hits, and they can't get critical hits here. Are they going to have the same degree of success in brute forcing their way through the wall? No, absolutely not. A burst damage class might be able to burst their way through that wall, but maybe normal marshals won't be able to do it fast enough. And spellcasters could attempt to dispel magic. Again, probably needs to be in their highest level spell slot to be successful, but if that's something that you're regularly preparing or you have as one of your maybe signature spells, that can be an easy way to just 2 actions end this effect. And there are other spells other than Dispel Magic that might do this. There are spells like Magic Passage that can just make a doorway in a bunch of stone. You could disintegrate that stone very easily, or some other similar spell effect. But you might have some cooler ways of dealing with this as well. For example, there is a Minotaur Ancestry feat, Stone Passage, that just basically lets them literally walk through stones, which has been surprisingly useful in my current campaign for getting into buildings and getting out of bad scenarios. So rate yourself on how you did on this one. And for our final example here, let's go to some end of dungeon high tension scenario. So you have defeated the boss, you go, you pick up the magical item that you were sent in to get, and you realize that there is a dreadful trap. And you have activated some high-level haunt. And let's imagine that this haunt can only be deactivated with 4 successful checks. You need a successful check on a very high DC for your level on a Recall Knowledge from each one of the spell traditions. You need to succeed at a very high level DC for Arcana, Nature, Occultism, and Religion in order to win this scenario. But let's imagine that each round you fail. Like if you don't succeed after 1 round, it is going to do something terrible and dreadful. Let's say that it sends out a wave of confusion that might waste a bunch of your actions. I don't know if you have ever been on the wrong side of a confused, optimized fighter, but it is not fun. So, is your party capable of covering each tradition? And are you capable of boosting those Recall Knowledge checks in some way to actually increase your chances of success in a timely fashion? So think through it, and you might need to think about your likely skill trainings for your party. You probably have a good idea of what everyone is good at, but let's say you're at higher level play. This is going to require 4 different master challenge level tasks. Are you up to it, or is this going to defeat you? And there's a ton of solutions to this one. You can use your spell slots to increase your odds at a successful Recall Knowledge check. For example, Pocket Library at different levels can give you, say, a +1 or a +2 to your Recall Knowledge checks. You could attempt to re-roll those Recall Knowledge rolls if they are not going well and you are not successful. So Crichton's Cognitive Crossover is a really neat feat that you can use to re-roll a failed Recall Knowledge check using a tradition that you might be better at on the second roll. And this is a time where someone like an alchemist might shine, They might be able to, on the spot, use their quick alchemy to make some cognitive mutagens or another mutagen that boosts your skill in some capacity so that you can make the numbers go in your favor a little bit more. And an alchemist is a great party member in scenarios where you are trying to deal with specific niche problems because they are very, very good at answering specific niche problems because of the combination of all the formulas that they know and their ability to just make those things on the spot. So, how successful do you think you were on this one? Give yourself a little score. Alrighty, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. You can total up your points, kind of rate your party, and see how you did. And I hope these hypothetical scenarios can help you think about your team building, your character building, and where the things are that can possibly beat your party are. Because at the end of the day, all it takes is one encounter that you can't beat to end your campaign. And most of the time, when you are presented with a combat, a traditional combat, the math is such that the party is expected to win. And even the most difficult scenarios, mathematically speaking, are meant to basically be 50-50, where if your rolls are reasonable, your strategy is pretty good, you are likely to come out ahead. In all of my time playing Pathfinder, I have never TPK'd in Pathfinder. I have had to retreat in D&D 5e. I have never had to retreat in Pathfinder yet. There have been some times that I was thinking about it, but we managed to pull through. I've lost a few PCs along the way, but we've always come out ahead as a party. If you are prepared for the tricky scenarios in advance, if you are ready for the weird stuff, then you are less likely to end up in a scenario where the math of winning is not in your favor. And when you look at optimization guides, they are often focused on scaling the damage up. How do I make this character have the most impact on the battle? How do I make them roll the most dice? When in reality, I think scaling up your utility and creating very, very well-rounded characters is often the key to staying alive in difficult fights. And I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and show you the current PC that I am playing, or at least a bunch of snippets that illustrate my points here. So I am currently playing a 14th level Necromancer. On the right here are my skill trainings. You will notice that I am a master in Arcana, Nature, Occultism, Religion, as well as 3 different lores that are very, very relevant to my specific campaign. I'm going to know what's going on in fights. I am ready to recall knowledge on anything. And I am ready to talk to anything. I have taken the multilingual feat to increase the number of languages that I actually know, picking a lot of the weird and slightly evil languages, as that's the sort of stuff that my DM tends to enjoy. And if those aren't enough, I also have Translate available to get me over the line for whatever language I happen to be missing. I also have some utility spells available, like Dark Vision and See the Unseen, and I tend to keep Revealing Light prepared every day. But Phil, you have 2 spell slots per level as a Necromancer. How can you devote some of those to utility spells? Well, great question, Timmy. As it turns out, that Revealing Light that I keep prepared every single day has saved my butt 3 different times versus invisible or otherwise concealed enemies. It is worth its weight in gold, even if I don't have that many spell slots. Similarly worth its weight in gold are my 3rd level spell slots, which I at this point pretty much always have Hypercognition to recall knowledge. It's either 5 or 6 times for a single action, and Martyr's Intervention to save my fellow PCs from going down. This is the sort of way that I build my characters. I try to build my characters to be ready for everything that I possibly can be ready for. Can my Necromancer do it all? on their own? No, absolutely not. I really do need to rely on the fighter to take the hits. I really do need to rely on the healing from our healing font cleric to keep everyone up. But I can be a damn good party supporter with all of these tools that I have here. And with these tools, my party members, more often can not, be doing the thing that they want to be doing. And that's going to lead us to being successful in most of our combats. With that, folks, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day, and I hope this video was useful to you all. If you made it to this point and you're not subscribed already, this is a very fantastic time to do so to help my analytics as I am evaluating the future of this channel. All right, have a great day. See ya!